Hello everybody and welcome to today's video where we are going to be discussing the different strategies and techniques used in World War II. This includes tanks, aircrafts, gases and guns for the technologies, and pigeons, dogs and secret codes for the techniques. Without further ado, let's jump into the first piece of technology. The first piece of technology we are going to be talking about is tanks. Probably the most well-known piece of World War technology, other than guns of course. Now these absolute honkers of machinery were bulletproof and were overall the safest way for you to get behind enemy lines. And while first being used in the Battle of the Somme in World War I, they really didn't play a big role in combat until World War II. Tanks were able to cross trench lines quickly without taking much damage. Now, without further ado, let's get right into the statistics of tanks. Tanks' arguably best quality is their defense. As stated earlier, they're not only bulletproof, but are amazing for charging trenches in need of assistance. The most notable combat use in World War I was the Battle of the Somme, where the British deployed 2 tanks, however one got stuck in the mud, so only one was there, to charge a German base which had a submachine gun, and this was really helpful since they are bulletproof. However, in World War II there aren't really that many notable feats to do with only tanks, as tanks were a lot more widespread and used a lot more. As for their reload speed, it's absolutely abysmal. Tanks back then were rather compact, to where you see now, meaning that they were not able to carry much ammo. As well as this, the reload speed takes forever, as you have to have someone manning the cannon up above, as well as aiming it. And overall, tanks were a great addition to the war, helping turn the tide of the battle. Next up, we're going to be looking at the most well-known of the technology used in World War, the guns. We are going to be looking at 3 guns, each with a specific purpose. First off, the Lee Enfield rifle, which is of course a rifle, the Vickers machine gun, which, you guessed it, is a machine gun, and the projector infantry and anti-tank. Of course, all these 3 are different, so we're going to need to do 3 different analyses, but without further ado, let's get into the first analysis of the Lee Enfield rifle. The Lee Enfield rifle was a standard infantry rifle used by Canadian troops during the Second World War. However, it had been used by the British Army since 1895 and would continue to be used until 1957. However, there were some issues with them during the First World War, so they were dropped during the middle of it. Now onto the stats. The length of the Lee Enfield rifle was around 1.34 centimeters, which is 1 meter and 34 centimeters for those of you who couldn't work that out, with a weight of 4.1 kilograms, and it could usually have around 10 rounds of magazines put in. It was also a turn bolt action rifle. For those of you who don't know what that means, it simply means how you reload it. You have to turn to take out the place where you put in the magazines, and then you have to bolt it to put it back in. Then you're ready to fire. However, since there were only 10 bullets, you had to learn to reload quickly, otherwise this could be your death. And that was the main problem. They did take a while to reload. Even the most efficient reloaders of the Lee Enfield rifles could usually do it in around 6 seconds. And in war, 6 seconds can be the difference between life and death. However, their reload speed is much faster than most other guns. They're definitely not the fastest reloading guns out there. As for their effectiveness, you could usually aim for pretty far with them, and they could reach rather far, however they would lose effectiveness the farther you went. And while it was sort of easy to aim due to the fact that they had a scope at the top, it was nothing compared to later guns used. As for its effectiveness, there was a reason it was dropped, and that's because it started to become inefficient. The reload time really started to stack up, thus making it become useless. However, it is still a notable gun as it was used in the Second World War, as well as it probably being the only gun used by Canadian troops during the Second World War. Its first main use was during the Great War. That's right, it's the Vickers machine gun. Now, as mentioned before, this is the submachine gun used in the Battle of the Somme, which again was the only time it was significantly used during the First World War. However, due to the increase in submachine guns started by the Germans in the Second World War, it did lead to the increase in tanks, which is actually very interesting as it shows that they were adapting, which honestly no one really expected. Anyway, on to the statistics. It's easy to see why the strategy was over-centralized. These things were absolute monsters, with a weight totaling out to around 38 kilograms without water, meaning that you couldn't simply push it out of the way, with a range of over 1,000 meters and being able to push out over 600 bullets a minute. It's easy to see why the strategy was over-centralized, leading to the rise of the tank coming back from World War I. Now you might have noticed that I said without water. Yes, that's because these guns required a steady supply of water in order to make sure the gun's barrel was cool, to make sure they didn't overheat and potentially explode. Now at first you might think, why the hell would you do that? There is no feasible way for you to think, oh yeah, let's just waste our precious resource of water on this gun. But it was worth it, as in an average battle, it took out about 500 soldiers, meaning that this was definitely a good investment. The gun's length is of course around 1.1 meters, around an average gun, and while they were getting even more portable, they became even more dangerous until the rise of the tank. There's nothing else to say except that it was an amazing gun and was definitely worth using. The last gun we are going to be talking about is the Projector Infantry Anti-Tank, called PAT for short. Now the PAT was simple. It was a short-range infantry anti-tank weapon, which made it possible to damage tanks. Now what the PAT did was it propelled shaped charge projectiles by a huge spring, and it was extremely heavy and awkward to handle. It was mainly used in World War II, along with the Vickers machine gun, in order to do damage to tanks and soldiers alike. But now let's move on to the statistics. And to be honest, despite being one of the only ways to damage tanks, it overall wasn't that good. As said before, it was awkward and heavy to handle, and it was difficult to reload, and had to be kicked violently sometimes to even fire. Nonetheless, it was effective given the right circumstances. However, with a weight of 14.5 kilograms, the range being about 90 meters, the projectile being, of course, the shaped charge projectiles, weighing around 1.3 kilograms, and only penetrating the tanks for around 75 millimeters, it overall didn't end up being that effective. However, the velocity was over 100 meters per second if fired correctly, meaning that if they didn't see it coming, it could have been deadly towards the tanks, leading to a downfall. However, it really had to be the correct circumstances for you even to stand a chance. Next up, we are going to be talking about the second to last method used, which is gas. Gas is mainly affiliated with the concentration camps run by Nazis in World War II, and how millions got exterminated in gas chambers. However, how effective was gas? Let's get into the statistics and check that right now. And the statistics show that gas was extremely effective. Despite having one main counter, which was of course being gas masks, there was a total of around 5 to 10 seconds between inhaling the gas and the reaction it gave you, which was of course death. And of course, not everyone happens to carry around a gas mask. While soldiers basically required it after they knew the Nazis were using gas, your average Joe wouldn't go around carrying a gas mask unless he really felt the need to. As well as it being poisonous gas, it also doubled as a smoke screen, considering that the gas often came out in a nauseous green look, meaning that while they were putting on their gas mask, it was easy for Nazis Germans, who already had gas masks on, to hop into the enemy trenches and get a kill or two while they're waiting for them to realise what has just happened. To top it all off, gas has the second highest kill count of any military strategy, behind only guns of course, with a kill count of over 80 million, while guns have a kill count of over 500 million, making it an easy victor. But gas definitely kill a lot more than tanks or aircraft did. Speaking of aircrafts, they are the last piece of war technology we are going to be talking about. During World War II, there were three major types of aircrafts used, those being fighter aircrafts, bombers, and cargo aircrafts. With fighter aircrafts being, you guessed it, being able to fight in the air, while usually being accompanied by a bomber or two. Bombers, which were aimed to bomb specific areas in order to halt war efforts, and cargo aircrafts, which were usually tasked with taking resources to certain parts of different countries. All three were extremely effective and extremely well known. However, the two aircrafts we're going to be focusing on are the fighter aircraft, specifically the Spitfire, and bomber aircrafts. Probably the most well-known fighter aircraft in existence is the Supermarine Spitfire, which is a British single-seat fighter aircraft, believe it or not, used by the Royal Air Force during World War II. It had a great reload speed, as well as being able to shoot many bullets. However, it did have a short range. It had high performance, great turning and great maneuverable ability, while also having great speed in general. They were usually accompanied by a few bombers on the way to an enemy territory, usually with the intent of stopping whatever is going on, which most of the time worked. As for the sturdiness, this isn't exactly the most sturdy plane out there. It'll usually go down at around 200 bullets to the propeller. However, if you were good enough at piloting it, you could maneuver around said bullets, meaning that it could last a lot longer than intended, and this was its main way of defending itself. Since they couldn't put on too much weight because it needed to fly freely and fast, they made it so that you could move a lot faster than the average plane, which allowed it to survive as long as it did, making the Spitfire one of the most useful planes during the World Wars. However, the most successful plane during World War II has to go to the various bomber planes, as these played a huge role in air warcraft, as bombers' main intention was to go to enemy manufacturing places and destroy them, meaning that they couldn't get out any more tanks, guns, or in some cases aircrafts, which usually gave the enemy an upper hand. Now, these things played a massive role. They could usually contain around 20 to 30 bombs, and in the case of the British Aero 863 Lancaster, it was able to carry 56 bombs, all of which were used to bomb enemy manufacturers, which gave the British a significant upper hand. And that is all the technology that played a key role in World War II. Now that you know about most of the best technology used, it's time to go over to some of the strategies used. The first strategy technique we're going to be looking at is dogs. Now, dogs did play a rather significant role in the war, as they were mainly used to deliver messages from one HQ to the other. Some dogs were even specially bred to help fight in case they got into a bit of a sticky wicket, which is really interesting when you think about it. Of course, we're not going to be able to do a stat check for stuff like dogs and pigeons, since every breed is different, although we will go over a few of the different breeds that were used. The different breeds used were reduced to 7 in 1944, and the 7 different breeds that were allowed to be used are German Shepherds, Belgian Sheepdog, Doberman Pinchlets, Farm Collies, Siberian Huskies, Malamutes, and Eskimo dogs. Crossbreeds of these dogs were also acceptable, except they were more frowned on. The next technique we're going to be looking at is war pigeons. Whereas war dogs were mainly focusing on carrying a message from trench to trench, war pigeons mainly focused on carrying messages from HQ to HQ. This is due to their speed and intelligence. In fact, they played such a big role that the United Kingdom alone sent out 250,000 homing pigeons for many different purposes, with 32 pigeons even receiving the Dickin Medal, which is the highest possible ranking medal an animal can receive. Most of these pigeons even had selected names, including Commando, Paddy, William of Orange, Mary of Exeter, G.I. Joe, and Gustav. Overall, it paid off to be an effective strategy, as it had a big hand in helping Britain win the Second World War. Hey, thanks for watching the video this far. Hope you enjoyed it, because it took a long time to make. The footage got deleted because I made a mistake, so I had to redo this. That's why it might seem a little bit rushed. But I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something from this. See you all later. Goodbye.